the families of Grace O'Malley Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates using terms like blood on their hands. No wonder the government is moving towards an independent inquiry into NHS mistakes that led to their deaths. The families used the phrase to criticise medical professionals whose section then released Valdo Calocane 4 times and without sufficient supervision on the last. They are harsh words, understandably perhaps, and Grace's parents are doctors.
Psychiatrists knew he was dangerous up to 3 years before Valdo Calocane killed 3 people on the streets of Nottingham. But the public was put at risk of a paranoid schizophrenic who refused to take his medication because of a series of errors in his care.
They've got blood on their hands, metaphorically, because had they done their job properly, Barney would be alive today. I have no doubt about that.
They are failings that the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates had long suspected.
I think it's systemic across the country, and it's a case of how many Calocanes are out there in the community, not being cared for.
Calocane had been diagnosed 3 years before his knife and van attacks last June, which also seriously injured 3 people. For 2 years, while in the care of the Nottinghamshire Healthcare Trust, he was sectioned 4 times. But among the failures in today's report, risk assessments didn't make explicit the serious danger he posed. Information from his own family wasn't consistently acted upon. And 9 months before the attacks, he was discharged to his GP after failing to turn up for an appointment.
When we say the NHS is broken, it has life and death consequences. And for 3 grieving families, we are seeing the consequences of what happens when mental health services don't do what they are legally required to do.
He said he's been reassured that steps were already being taken in Nottinghamshire and across the country to avoid the same mistakes being repeated.
It was a danger from the outset, but they just kept releasing him back into the public.
But for Ian Coates' son James, this latest review is more justification for a broader inquiry into failings by several public bodies.
Everything's quite separate and siloed. We need something that brings everything in together, and I feel that's what the public inquiry will do. And we can get a lot of the answers that we're still looking for.
The parents of Grace O'Malley Kumar say that inquiry, promised to them by the Prime Minister, must hold individuals to account.
Each time he was sectioned, his treatment didn't change, or people couldn't be bothered to change his treatment. I'm more than convinced that this was wholly avoidable if this person had been treated with any form of responsibility whatsoever.
What do you think needs to happen now?
We want accountability because, any doctor who fails or are negligent need to be held accountable, quite frankly.
No individuals involved in Calocane's care were named in today's report. The Health Trust's chief executive has apologised, but apologies aren't sufficient for 3 families determined to get answers and urgent change. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Nottingham.
And Carl is here to talk about all this. Well, listen, we heard the Health Secretary there describing the NHS as broken. He did say that many times when they were in opposition, it's true, but now it's his responsibility.
It is, and to be perfectly honest, today's report doesn't offer that much in terms of a repair manual, because what it says again and again is not that the procedures were wrong, it was that people didn't follow them. People didn't do the jobs they were supposed to be doing. Now, what the report doesn't answer is why that happened. Were people undertrained? Were they overstretched? Were departments under-resourced? The report doesn't answer that. That's not its job. But certainly it is likely that that is part, at least, of the answer. Mental health campaigners point out that mental health services have been underfunded for years. They've been cut and cut, especially in terms of the number of beds. So the government does have, at least in part, an answer for that. They want to hire another 8,500 mental health staff. The NHS has already told trusts not to cut mental health services any further. But it's not just about resources. And this is the really tricky bit, because there is also the question about whether too many very ill people are being cared for in the community, and whether some of those very ill people, like Valdo Calocane, have too much say over their own treatment, especially if they lack insight into their own mental illness. Now, Labour wants to reform the Mental Health Act to give people more say. They are now likely to have to think again about whether the most ill people do have much input into their own treatment.